Okay guys, Craig with JS Racing Products here. Going to do a small video today. It won't actually be a real small one, be a little bit of time here. It's time for me to upgrade to our JS Racing Products Spec 2 cam in the Porsche. We've ran the car with the stock 5.3 cam, got you guys some mile an hour and dyno numbers. We've ran it with a stock 6-liter cam for giggles, which, as most of you know, happens to be the same cam as the later LS1s. So, you know, basically the cam most people throw away. We stuck that in, and as you saw from that footage, we gained a little power and we gained a little mile an hour. Now it's time to put in our Spec 2 cam so you guys can actually see once and for all what kind of gains to expect. Obviously, every chassis that an LS motor is in will have slightly different steps as far as getting the stuff out of the way to do the cam swap, but the actual cam swap process itself remains the same for all LS engines. So, with that being said, we'll get started. The first thing I'm going to do in my case is I'm going to start removing everything that's in the way for me to be able to slide the cam out. So I'm going to have to take off my bumper cover. I'm going to have to take out the intercooler. I'm going to have to take out the radiator. I'm going to have to remove my downpipe off the turbo and the upper intercooler piping so I can get to the water pump. And that'll bring us to a point where we'll have access to the complete front of the motor. We'll take the serpentine belt off. And I don't need to show you guys the nuts and bolts on how I'm taking my bumper off. Everybody's cars are different. I'm sure probably not too many people will be doing this in a 944. So I'll pick up the video with stuff moved out of the way, some progress, and you know, once we start getting down to the stuff that's, you know, more you know, stuff that happens for every LS motor, for example, like we have to take the valve covers off, we have to pull the crank pulley off, etc., etc. The stuff that actually is the same for everybody, then I'll show more nuts and bolts when it comes to that. So that's what we'll do. I'll pick up here with a little bit of progress, some stuff moved out of my way, and we'll do a video today on how to swap a cam in your LS motor. Hopefully how to install a JS Racing Products cam in your LS motor. I think you all would like that. I know I would. So we'll pick up here in a minute. Alright, boys and girls, so we're up to the point now where all LS motors getting a cam swap will be about the same procedure. As you see, I've gotten access to the front of the engine here, gotten everything out of the way. So obviously to take the radiator out I had to start draining the water, and that's what's in that kitty litter pan there. But there's still going to be some more when I take the water pump off. So that's going to be the first step. First step is remove the water pump, and that's 6 bolts, 10 millimeter, 3 on each side. And once those are loose, you pop the water pump right out. Now my water pump has a fitting I drilled and tapped into here, because when I do these turbo LS motors in a swap, usually there's a crossover tube here for the steam vents on the head, and that usually goes into like the radiator hose or something in the factory location. And since the aftermarket stuff here I'm using don't have that, I usually just tap and drill a small brass fitting right there behind where the other tensioner normally would be, if this had the spring tensioner still on it, and then that allows me to you know, vent the steam port still. But okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the water pump. Slide back the kitty litter pan there to catch the water. That's going to come out, because it'll come out between the block and the water pump. And we'll pick up then with the next step after that. Alright, so water pump's off. I usually spend a few minutes using my sucky thing, you know, the like turkey baster type thing, to suck out water out of these ports, because that way, once we pull this timing cover off, water don't run down and get into your oil pan. Next step's going to be to pull the crank pulley off. This can be tricky, it can be a bear, it could come right off easy. Obviously this is the bolt has to be taken out. It's a standard thread, so you just, you know, spin it out, and then you need to use like a 3-jaw puller to get onto the crank and actually pull it off. What I like to do then is I have a smaller bolt that goes right into the end of the crank here. It kind of has the same head as this, but it doesn't actually thread in. and that lets me actually put my my puller 3-jaw against something sturdy to push against, so I'm not like pushing into the hole or messing the threads up on the crank. So we'll go ahead and get that set up now and ready to pull off the crank pulley, and we'll pick up from there. Okay, so we're almost into the cam. So at this point we can do it two ways. We can either start pulling the coil packs off and the valve covers, or we can go ahead and pull the timing cover off, whichever you want to do. Timing cover is all 10mm bolts. They'll be all around the edge here, and then there'll also be 2 coming up through the bottom from the oil pan. Just go ahead and run them out and pull the cover off, and you can see we'll be able to see the timing chain and gear. But we can't actually start pulling the cam out until we undo all the rockers and get all the load off of them. So what I'm probably going to do here next is 2 pieces. I'll probably pull the timing cover off quick, and then I'll pull the coil packs off and the valve covers, and then go ahead and loosen the rockers. The rockers are 8mm. Just loosen them all the way to where they're sloppy. You don't actually have to take them off the car, just to remove them all the way, so that there's no spring pressure being pushed down on the lifter. And we'll pick up the camera footage then from right around there. Alright, so we've gone ahead and taken the valve covers off, loosened all the rockers. I'll just kind of sitting on there, that's fine, you don't got to take them off. Timing covers off. This side's all loosened up on rockers. Next step now is going to go ahead and take the cam gear off, which is just going to be these 3 10mm bolts. Before we do that, sometimes I kind of like to go ahead and line up the dots a while, and I'll show you what that means. These are really easy to get in, to put in time and everything like that. There's a dot. Let's see if I can find. Okay, looks like I'm just barely past. Let me see if I can get in here and show you. Okay. Right here on the gear is a little is a little dot. It's like an indent. All right. There's also going to be one on the gear behind this oil pump here down in. And that one's harder to show you with the flashlight and everything. But there's one. It'll be on the facing tooth down in here. And what you want to do is when you have the cam, when you go to put the cam back in, this dot needs to be straight up and this one needs to be straight down. It's really hard to get it off because these are kind of a coarse tooth chain. And if you're off even just one tooth, it's really hard to get the dots to line up. So next step is going to be to go ahead and try to get those lined up. Looks like they're really close. I just have to rock the motor back a little bit. What I'll probably do is stick a bolt in the crankshaft here and just turn it. I didn't pull the plugs out, so there's probably going to be some compression to fight against, but it'll go if you go slow. Once these are up and down and lined up, I'm going to go ahead and pull the cam gear off by taking out these bolts. Behind this will be a retaining plate that holds the cam in. That has some 10mm bolts as well. Some years have a star head or a Torx head. And once that's taken off, we can go ahead and get ready to pull the camshaft out, and we'll pick up with those steps. Okay, so I got the dots straight up and straight down, which inconsequently also puts the dial for the cam straight across at 3 o'clock. Not the big a deal, you can't really go off that. But dot straight up on the crank, dot straight down on the cam gear, took it apart. Now we take off these 4 retaining bolts and take this plate off, and we'll pick up with the next step after that. Alright, cam gear retaining plates off. Now, this is where some guys just roll the dice and they will rotate the cam a bunch of times like this, which shoves the I should actually put some bolts in there to turn it, makes it a little easier. Actually, you know what I like to use? I like to use water pump bolts. Yeah, I stick like 2 water pump bolts in there because that helps me when I'm going to pull it out as well. So we'll stick 2 of the bolts from the water pump in there. They thread right in. And what a lot of guys do is they'll sit here and crank that a couple times, and that pushes all the lifters up into the plastic lifter tray holders. They can still fall out though, but some guys at this point will go ahead and slide that cam out of there slide the new one in to get lucky and no lifters fall down. I don't push my luck that hard, so I've gone ahead and built, let's see here, show you. I went ahead and made my own high-end cam retaining tool. Just kidding, they're not high-end. They're oak dowel rods. I put a little bit of a taper on the end. See, they've been used quite a few times. They're oily. Once you've spun the cam a few times, you're going to go ahead and work them in right here on either side, like this, and you work them in gently. If they seem like they're hitting on something, you stop and try again until they're all the way bottomed out. That side's always the tightest. This side always goes in real nice. Right here. There, done. Now those dowel rods keep the lifters from being able to fall down all the way into the oil pan and make it that you have to pull the motor apart. They don't necessarily stop them from falling down a little bit. You may end up still having to push them up a little bit if they fall out a little. But now this will let me slide that cam out right through the front here, like that. So I'm going to go ahead and work it out. Be careful, do it slow. Take it easy, don't jerk and bang it around because your cam bearings are fragile. Take your time, get it out. Go ahead and lube up the replacement cam that's going back in, put the longer bolts in so you have something to hold on to, and work it back in, spinning it as you go. Okay, so we'll pick up the camera footage with me showing the cam out. Alright, cam's out. Got the new JS Racing Products Spec 2 cam here. This is the one that I sell the heck out of, so actually it'd be nice to show you guys how to put this in. This goes perfect with my turbo kits for most of these setups. And now we'll actually see some mile an hour and dyno numbers as well to go with it. So I'm going to go ahead and carefully work this baby back in now, and we'll pick up with the reverse procedures. Alright, cam's in. And now we're going to go ahead and just reverse the procedure and go ahead and put the the plate back on that helps keep the cam from coming out. I like to use my German torque wrench on that. I know there's specs. You can look up online and do them if you want. Just after a while I get tired of doing little things like this with a torque wrench. So I use my German torque wrench. That's good and tight. And just make them good and tight, and then they're all good to go. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put that plate on, snug it up, get the gear on, snug it up. On the gear I do like to put a little bit dab of Loctite on the threads. And go ahead and get the dots lined up. I'd like to try to show you the procedure with the camera if I can there, so we'll pick up that. Alright, it's time to go ahead and put the cam gear back on. I got the cam in relatively about this location it needs to go, which, you know, we figured out before it's about 3 o'clock. So the trick, it's going to be hard to hold the camera and do this. Let's see if I can't set it in here in such a way that you can watch me. You can kind of see there, okay? The trick is going to be to get the chain back around the gear and the crank gear in such a way that it all lines back up nicely. So kind of dip it down in here and get her in. As you see, you can kind of shift it. There we go. And the cam likes to push back against you. So to hold it out, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and thread in this one bolt. This we can actually pull it out. And there we go. Now that's off by at least my dots over here, and I want it straight down. So I'm going to go ahead and pop it back off. And I know I got to rotate the cam now by at least one tooth. Go ahead and reach back here and rotate it. Alright. Let's see, we're still off by about a tooth. Go ahead and come down here and drop it down and come back up. There we go. That should be right about on. Go ahead and see how that lines up. There we go. And that's dead on. So we're talking straight down on this dot, straight up on that dot. If we were off in either direction by anything significant, you would never get the dots to line up. So it's kind of impossible when you get down to it to be off a tooth or so on these, because they're such a coarse chain. It's really obvious when you are. So now the procedure is to go ahead and torque these down. I like to make them good and tight as well, with just a little bit of Loctite on the bolts. And we'll just reverse the procedure here, start putting things back together. Let's start putting it back together now. Make sure these gaskets are mostly always reusable. Several times. I've had this one apart quite a few times. No problems yet. Make sure it's lined up good. This one's actually got a little bit of a tear in it, but it doesn't leak, so we're good to go. We'll get the gasket all lined up. And when you put the timing cover bolts in, don't tighten them all the way. Let the timing cover kind of wiggle. Get them close, because we're going to want to put the crank pulley on first. The crank pulley snout right here will actually center the timing cover where it wants to be, so it doesn't leak, because there is a seal around there. And if you would just have that shifted too far down, too far up, because it does have a little wiggle room. They actually sell a tool for doing this, but you don't need the tool. You just do it like this. Don't snug it down all the way yet. Don't put the ones in the oil pan up in yet. Just do the perimeter ones. Then we'll put the pulley in, and with the pulley in, it'll center that cover. Then we just go ahead and torque it down, then run the oil pan ones up in. Okay? We'll pick up with that. Alright, so it's time to put the crank pulley on. I got the timing cover just loosely snugged down, so it can still shift a little bit as it wants. You don't want any of these actually touching. You see it has a little bit of play there, up and down and around and around, okay? But what we're doing is we're actually heating up this, because this is a slip fit, so I got the heat gun on it. Just rotate it, let it hit each side for a while. It doesn't have to be glowing red hot or anything, obviously, but the crankshaft's nice and cool, and this gets nice and hot, you know, then it'll slip over that much easier. We still got to pound it on, so what I usually do is I'll get a piece of 2x4, probably end up using this one, and my mini sledge, and I will just drive that on until I can catch a decent number of threads with the bolt. And you know, you might even change bolts. This one's been used to pull the thing on a couple times. Looks like we got a little bit of a boogered up thread there, but I've done so many of these. These are actually a throwaway bolt you're only supposed to use once, and I used to do that too, but I don't anymore. I use them over and over. As you see in this drawer here, here's one. There's another one. They're to me, these are multi-use. So I'll pick the one out that has the nicest looking threads. Probably that one. And I'll pound that on with a hammer until I can catch a decent number of threads, and then I'll use the impact gun to draw it on the rest of the way. And make sure that is tight. Make sure your air compressor is all the way full and you have her tight. That's something that's very important. So I'm going to go ahead and do this and get her on there, and we'll pick up with some steps after that. Alright guys, so went ahead and drawed down the crank pulley to help center the timing cover, and now the timing cover snugged down all the bolts. This would have been a perfect opportunity to weld the drain for your turbo into the timing cover if that's what you were going to do. You can put the drain off to the side. Remember, you don't want the hose to hit into this, so you got to kind of angle it. But you want to pick a spot where you're also not interfering with your bolts. So it can be, you have to be a little creative sometimes, depending on where your drain is. As you see in this car, the drain goes down to the pan, into the side of the pan down there, right there. And this is also a good time for me to go ahead and show you guys some examples. Like when I sell a turbo kit, we discuss merges and proper wastegate placement. This is a good example here of a merge. So here we have this manifold coming down underneath the alternator, coming across. This one here coming up, and they merge right here. They form a Y. And then here's the bare T4 flange like you get from me. So it'd be 2.5 inch merged into a 3, And then the wastegate placement in this case is perfect. It's right after both merges and before the flange. Perfect wastegate placement. Always make sure that you dump the wastegate gas away from wherever the turbo's inlet will be. You don't want this turbo to be able to have gas, you know, burnt exhaust coming up through here with wind or air and getting sucked in. You wouldn't think it affects it, but it greatly affects your power. You have to have pure, nice pure air, no exhaust in it. Okay, so with that little tutorial aside, I can go ahead and start reversing the processes still. Water pump goes back on next. Once the water pump's back on, I can go ahead and start putting back the pieces that are unique to my build. One thing that will be the same for all of us is you have to now go ahead and snug down and torque all your rocker bolts. You have to look that spec up online. I actually don't remember what it is. I'm one of those people that uses my German torque wrench on these things, and I just make them good and tight. Valve covers, then coil packs, spark plugs hooked back up, everything back on the front, water back in. And as you guys noticed, probably caught on to it, some of the smart ones, I didn't have any antifreeze in this motor. I don't care to run antifreeze unless it's freezing outside. There's all kinds of arguments about, oh, corrosion protection and water pump lubrication. Let's face it, these are junkyard motors that are getting pounded the snot out of them way more than they were ever meant to. We're not going to have these things last us for another 100,000 miles unless you're babying the thing or barely driving it. So corrosion, that's out the window. But if you drag race out of track, and I'm warning you right now, you'll be really good friends with the owner if you listen to me. Run straight water. If you pop this thing at the racetrack and you put down antifreeze, oh, you're going to be hated. I mean, I don't know how many of you have been to the track and had somebody put antifreeze down, but that stuff is nasty to get cleaned up and takes a long time. Water pretty much evaporates right off. So straight water is all I run. When it gets closer to winter, I'll go ahead and throw in enough antifreeze to keep it from freezing, popping out the freeze plugs. But alright guys, that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and pick up the video footage a couple more times, but for the most part now you know how to swap a cam, and we'll get some footage here Friday and then Monday on the dyno and show you guys what a JS Racing Products secret spec 2 cam can actually do. It's about time. I know quite a few of you have already purchased the cam with your kits and are running them, but for those of you who haven't or were curious, now we'll have some figures. I wanted to take a small break and discuss something with you guys that I know some of my customers run into, and I know I certainly have over the years, and that's cooling. Whenever you do one of these swaps into a car that's small, I mean, if you have this thing swapped in a big old Monte Carlo or Chevelle or something, you got access to a huge radiator, it's not that big a deal. But the tricks that we learn when we have to make it a big deal can still help you even when you have all the radiator size in the world. Look at the size of this radiator I'm keeping this car cool with. It's a little Scirocco radiator, aftermarket version of a Scirocco radiator, so it's very small. That's an 11-inch fan. So you see the 11-inch fan pretty much covers it. I want to discuss with you guys, when you're something like me and you're down to where you need to get every bit of cooling out of it as you can because you don't have the luxury of a huge radiator, there's a couple things I want you to pay attention to. One of them is getting the air through all the core. A lot of guys will just go ahead and zip tie or fasten the fan right to the fins, and then it only pulls through in that specific location. It doesn't actually get the whole core. You're going to want to use a shroud like this. See, this shroud covers the whole core, and then the fan bolts to it, forcing all the air to come through the whole core. So you use the whole thing. Secondly is the fan itself. And this can be the most important. I have a huge collection of fans over the years, and I'm going to teach you something about fans. There's a difference between rated CFM and CFM at load. Good companies will give you the CFM rating on their fans at different levels of load, and they do it with like inches of water. For example, the fan I did have on here was a SPAL fan. It was a 11-inch entry-level SPAL fan, and it wouldn't keep the car cool. It flowed 800 CFM at 0 inches of water. However, up around, I believe it was 1 inch or 2 inches of water, that 800 CFM fell down to 0. It basically became dead. It could not pull. And that's important because the draw, the inches of water that they're using, simulate how hard it is to pull through a thick core, or how thick how restrictive your core is to pull air through. This fan is rated at 1600 CFM at 0 inches, but it only falls down to 1400 CFM all the way up at the same spot. I think it was 2 inches of water where the other fan went to 0. And so it's very important to have a fan that can draw. I don't have any more overheating issues. I don't have any issues running warm unless it's a very, very hot day. And even then it doesn't overheat, it just runs warmer than I like to see. These engines are already meant to run pretty warm. They run up, 220 degrees on a regular basis in the factory form. Since I've installed this fan, even on the hottest day, I haven't gone past like 212, 215. I like to run right around 195 to 200 typically. So and I have the computer set to turn this fan on at 200 and off at 195. So it kind of fluctuates right in between 195 200 for the most part. I have very little airflow through the front of this because the intercooler completely blocks the radiator. So one thing that I have done is when the radiator is mounted in here, it sits back up in here, and then the intercooler comes out here. I built this tray to help kind of let air come right up in that little 1 inch gap that's between the two. This helps to like funnel air up in and get nice cold air. This hangs down slightly lower than the bumper, so feeds it a nice source of cold air. But yeah, I just wanted to show you guys that because I know a lot of you are first-time builders, and often overlooked and most frustrating thing can be trying to keep these things cool. Pick a good fan out. Typically your eBay fans, your cheapies down at your local parts store, no matter how big they are, even if they're a big old 15-incher, typically for a big thick 4-inch core, they will pull very little CFM when there's a restriction. You need something powerful. I don't recommend that you have to go this big. This is a monster. This is the most powerful 11-inch fan on the planet. It draws like 39 amps at full bore. It takes its own system. Here, it has to run off of its own heavy-duty 60 amp relay, and it has to run off of its own special big old freaking 60 amp fuse. Its own wiring harness actually too. It plugs right into this big old heavy gauge wires. But it's what I needed to do. I actually had to even upgrade my alternator to a higher amperage alternator unit just because the fan was drawing so much juice. The battery wouldn't charge very well before. But when I have such a small radiator and very little airflow and making the horsepower I am, it's what's required. So anyway, not really anything to do with cam swap. Just wanted to give you guys a little bit of tech advice while I was thinking about it. Been meaning to figure out a way to tell you guys this stuff. So anyway, I'm buttoning it back up slowly. Getting ready to put the radiator in. Got the downpipe on. Still have to do the rockers and valve covers yet and coil packs. But radiator back in and intercooler back on, and I can start putting the nose back together. And then once it cools off outside, I'll actually go out and start doing some street tuning. Bear in mind that when you do a mild cam swap, like when I went from the 5.3 cam to the LS1/6 liter cam, I barely had to touch anything in the tune at all. It was very negligible, almost to the point where I could have left it alone. And at first I did let it alone. However, this cam is a decent sized jump up. We're expecting great results out of it here at the dyno and on mile-an-hour wise, but it will require some adjusting of the tune all around. We're talking all the way from idle through all the way to the drivability range, all the way up through. It's going to need adjustment the whole way. So once it cools off here, it's pretty warm out today, it's in the 80s. Wait for the sun to start setting, get ready to go down. I'll go out in the street and I'll start dialing in the street drivability on it. Once I have the street drivability perfected, I'll start working on some moderate boost pulls. And like I said, for this coming Friday, weather permitting, we'll get her to the track and get you guys some mile an hour. And then come Monday, dyno appointment, and we'll get some horsepower numbers. We'll see what kind of gains. I'll show you guys some footage here after I have her about back together. Alright, we're all back together. Time to go ahead and put water in it. One thing that I wanted to also give you guys advice on, not required in any way, but I find it's very helpful, and that is whenever you get a chance, these LS motors can be a bear to get all the air bubbles out. Any of you have ever emptied one with water and tried to get her up and going, 9 times out of 10 you fought with the thing. It can be a pain in the ass to get all the air bubbles out of and not have the thing spit on you and throw fits and overheat. So I've come up with a little trick a while ago, and I just never really mentioned it, and I think I will now. And that is, take your thermostat out, and thermostats have a little jiggle valve in them. Now I don't have an LS one here to show you, but I think I have a Honda one. Okay, the Honda one don't have a jiggle valve, so I can't show you, but a lot of times in the LS one, somewhere right along in here, along the edge where my thumb's rubbing, there'll be a little jiggle valve. It's like a little hole with maybe a little brass piece in it that can block it or unblock it. What I do is I go around, and about the same size as that jiggle valve hole already is, I'll drill 2 or 3 more holes about in the same location so that the seal and the gas goes around, don't stop. And again, this is a Honda one, so it doesn't count. But the LS one, you'll see, you'll know what I mean. What this does, the LS motor has what's called a double thermostat. It's got like a bypass to it built in. In other words, the water's just perfectly content with just circulating around in the block behind the water pump through your heater valve. It doesn't even care sometimes about coming out past there. And if it don't come past there or flow through it, it can't get it up to temperature, it won't open, and that's where you get the overheating and the spitting and the hot spots. So by having a couple holes drilled around there, water and air bubbles are constantly circulating. There's no downside to doing this at all, other than, and this don't even count as a downside to me, it takes probably about 5 minutes longer to get up to operating temperature from a cold start. It takes a little longer to get up to hot. You know, big deal. But yep, that's the advice for the day. Drill a couple little holes in your thermostat, and you will have a system that very easily burps right out, bleeds right down through. These are handy for putting water in too. You can actually plug them. Plug it off like that, you know, so it doesn't spill. My radiator's tucked back in so far, I got to use the 90-degree angle in mine. So I'm going to fill her up with water now. It's still too hot out to go tune, but I'm going to fill her up with water, get her up to operating temperature, make sure it sounds good, and then shut her off, and then later on I'll go tune it. And you guys should be seeing some other footage sometime here soon down the road for quarter-mile improvements, hopefully. Should be, right? And dyno numbers. Thanks for watching how to swap a camshaft in your LS motor. And hopefully when you do it, it's a JS Racing Products cam.